My name is Zalika. I grew up in a house where I always felt like the spare part, the shadow behind my sister Emily. She was the golden child from the start, blonde, blue-eyed, all smiles and charm, the kind of daughter parents love to show off. And me? I was the other one, the one people glanced at and then moved past. My mom, Karen, always treated me like I was some sort of dull backdrop to Emily's shining spotlight. My dad, Robert, didn't say much. He never really stood up for me, just went along with whatever Mom decided. It wasn't just little things, it was constant. Emily got new clothes, I got her hand-me-downs. Emily's cheerleading trophies got a whole shelf, while my debate medals were shoved in a drawer. If relatives came over, Mom would parade Emily around, gushing about how gorgeous and talented she was, and when it came to me she'd say, "Oh, Zalika does fine in school." Fine. That was all I ever got. I tried to ignore it for years. I kept my head down, worked hard, and built my own life, even though inside I ached for the kind of love every daughter deserves. But this year, everything boiled over. A week before my mom's big birthday party, she called me. I could hear Emily giggling in the background. Mom's voice was almost casual, like she was asking me to pick up milk from the store. She said, "Honey, I think it's better if you don't come this time. You know, Emily's going to be in all the photos, and I don't want, well, you know how it is. I just don't want anything to look off." At first, I thought I'd misheard her. I asked her to repeat it. And she did, only slower, like I was too stupid to understand. She said I wouldn't look good standing next to Emily, and that the pictures had to be perfect. I can't explain how that felt. Like someone had reached inside me and crushed something fragile I'd been holding onto all my life. I was her daughter too, but she didn't even want me in the room on her birthday. I swallowed the lump in my throat and told her I was busy anyway, pretending like I didn't care. She sounded relieved, like she'd gotten away with something. Emily's laugh in the background felt like salt in the wound. That was the moment I knew this wasn't just about a party. It was about every time I'd been pushed aside, every time I was made to feel like I wasn't enough. And sitting there with the phone still in my hand, I promised myself it would be the last time they ever made me feel that way. I remember the phone call as if it happened a few minutes ago. My mom's voice carried that practiced sweetness she always used when she was about to say something cruel. She said, "Honey, Emily deserves the spotlight this year. I just don't want you dragging attention down in the photos." The words hit me like a slap. She didn't even hesitate, didn't soften it, just laid it out as if it were the most reasonable thing in the world. For a moment, I couldn't even breathe. My chest tightened, and I felt heat rising behind my eyes, but I wouldn't give her the satisfaction of hearing me break. So I forced a laugh, even though my throat was closing up, and said I was busy that weekend anyway. My voice sounded steady, almost cheerful, like it didn't matter. But inside, I was shattered. In the background, I caught the sound of Emily. She wasn't even trying to hide her amusement. That smug little chuckle told me she'd been listening the whole time, probably encouraging Mom to make that call in the first place. It wasn't enough that she always got the attention. She had to enjoy watching me get pushed aside, too. And then there was my dad. I knew he was home because I could hear the faint hum of the TV in the other room, his usual spot on the couch. But he didn't say a word. Not one. He let it happen, let Mom cut me out of her own celebration, like my feelings weren't worth defending. That silence was almost worse than Mom's word. At least she was openly cruel. He just sat there, pretending it wasn't his problem. When the call ended, I sat staring at the phone in my hand, my lips still curved in the fake smile I'd forced during the conversation, but my heart was pounding so hard it hurt. I thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet, all the times I'd swallowed the pain to keep the peace. And here I was again, pretending I was fine, when all I wanted to do was scream. I walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and held it with both hands just to stop them from shaking. The whole house felt colder, emptier, like the rejection had seeped into the walls. Emily had her spotlight, Mom had her perfect photos, and Dad had his silence. And me? I had the weight of their choice pressing down on me, heavier than ever. That night I didn't tell anyone about the call. I didn't cry out loud. I just lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying her words again and again, each time sharper than before. My own mother had told me not to come because I wasn't good enough to stand next to her favorite daughter. And that truth was something I could never unhear. Growing up, the signs were everywhere, though at the time I tried to tell myself it was normal. I can still see it clearly. Mom and Emily walking out of the mall, shopping bags dangling from their arms. Emily would twirl in some brand new outfit while Mom clapped her hands, calling her beautiful. My turn usually came later, in the form of clothes already worn thin, folded into a box with the words, "These will do for you." I told myself I didn't mind, but deep down I always knew the difference. It wasn't just about clothes. It was the way my achievements never seemed to count. I'd bring home a paper marked with the highest grade in the class, hoping it would earn me a pat on the back. Instead, Mom would glance at it and set it aside like it was nothing. But if Emily so much as scored a point in a cheer routine, there would be balloons, treats, and an endless stream of praise. I used to sit in my room afterward, staring at my homework, wondering what more I had to do to be noticed. Family gatherings were the hardest. Whenever relatives visited, it was Emily front and center, smiling for cameras, fielding questions, soaking in admiration. I was the extra, asked to step aside so people could get a nice shot of her alone. I remember standing in the corner of the living room, my plate in hand, watching everyone fuss over her as if she were the only daughter in the house. My name rarely came up. If it did, it was as an afterthought, something small, something forgettable. The memories blend together now. Emily in sparkling dresses, Mom's proud voice echoing about her routines, relatives clapping, cameras flashing. And me, fading into the background, pretending not to care while my insides twisted. Looking back, it wasn't just about one night or one cruel comment. The birthday phone call was only the loudest example of something I had been living with my whole life. The truth settled heavily on me as I pieced those moments together. This wasn't a sudden slip or a bad choice of words. It was a pattern stitched into the fabric of my family, repeated year after year until it became normal for Emily to shine, I had to be dimmed. For Mom to feel proud, I had to be invisible. And for Dad, silence was easier than speaking up. That realization cut deeper than the words from the phone call ever could. Because it wasn't about missing one party. It was about never truly belonging in my own family. It was about being placed on the sidelines, always second, always less. The birthday exclusion wasn't new. It was just the moment I finally admitted to myself that it had been happening all along. The night of the celebration came faster than I expected. I sat alone in my living room, the quiet pressing in from every corner. My phone stayed dark on the table, no calls, no messages, no sign that anyone cared I wasn't there. I tried distracting myself with a book, the TV, anything. But every time I glanced at the clock, I pictured them laughing around a table, candles glowing, music playing, smiles shining for the camera. My chest tightened with every imagined scene. My mother's proud grin, Emily soaking in every compliment, my father nodding along. I wasn't just absent, I had been erased. Tears blurred my vision, sliding down before I could stop them. I pressed my palms into my eyes, angry that I was crying over people who had never treated me as equal. But the sadness refused to stay buried. My body shook as I thought of all the times I tried to make peace, all the times I swallowed words to keep harmony. Tonight, they didn't even give me the option of pretending I belonged. A knock broke through the silence. I almost didn't answer, but the sound came again, gentle yet firm. When I opened the door, there stood Mrs. Callahan, my elderly neighbor with kind eyes and a habit of checking on me. She glanced at my face and didn't need to ask what was wrong. Her voice was soft but carried weight. You shouldn't let them treat you like this forever, dear. You deserve more than being left out. Her words hit something inside me I'd been burying for years. No one had ever said it so plainly. I wanted to brush it off, to insist I was fine, but my throat closed around the lie. She put a hand on my shoulder, steady and warm. At some point, she said, you have to decide whose life you're living, yours or theirs. After she left, I stood in the doorway for a long time, the air cool against my skin, her words echoing in my head. Something hardened in me then. I wiped my face, sat down, and whispered to myself, I'm done being their doormat. The sound of my own voice startled me. It wasn't weak, it wasn't shaky. It carried finality, a decision. I thought of every slight, every moment I had been told without words that I didn't measure up. They had built a version of me that stayed small so Emily could shine. But that night, staring into the emptiness of my apartment, I realized I didn't have to play that part anymore. The ache in my chest didn't disappear, but beneath it, something new began to grow. A spark. It was small, quiet, but it was there. Not just anger, not just hurt, something sharper, clearer. If they wanted me gone from their perfect pictures, then fine. But I wouldn't just fade away. I would rise in a way they never expected. The next morning, my phone buzzed with notifications. I unlocked it and saw the family chat flooded with images from the party. Emily stood in the center of every frame, her smile wide, her arm linked with my mother's. Balloons filled the background, the cake was enormous, and my father hovered nearby, grinning like everything in his world was perfect. They looked like a picture book family, polished and happy, as if nothing had been missing. I scrolled through each photo slowly, my stomach twisting. Not one of them even hinted that I existed. No one asked where I was, no one mentioned my name. It was as if I had never been a part of them at all. The longer I looked, the heavier the silence in that group chat became. My thumb hovered over the keyboard for a long time before I finally typed, "Wow. Thanks for the invite, guys. Looks like you had a blast without me." I hit send and waited. My sarcastic words hung there, glowing on the screen. A minute passed, then 2, then 5. Nothing. Not a single reply. The typing bubble never appeared. They had seen it. My mother always checked messages instantly, Emily too, but they chose not to respond. The emptiness of that choice stung worse than any cruel sentence. They hadn't just excluded me from the party. They were now excluding me from the conversation itself. I put the phone down, my hands trembling. For years, I had taken their treatment and tried to excuse it, telling myself maybe they didn't realize how much it hurt. But in that moment, staring at the silence of that group chat, I knew better. They knew exactly what they were doing. I wasn't overlooked. I was deliberately erased. A cold clarity settled over me. The tears that had come so easily the night before refused to fall. Instead, a steady calm spread through me, heavy but sharp. If they wanted to treat me as if I didn't exist, then I'd stop begging for space in their world. But I wouldn't just disappear quietly. No, they had taken too much from me already. Years of dignity, confidence, and peace. I whispered to myself, almost like a vow, they're going to regret this. The words filled the air of my apartment, firm and certain. I didn't know exactly how yet, but I knew I was done standing on the sidelines while they laughed without me. Their perfect pictures might have looked flawless to outsiders, but I saw what was really behind them. A family built on cruelty, favoritism, and silence. And from that day forward, I decided they would feel the weight of everything they had put me through. Not just once, not just in passing, but in a way they would never forget. I didn't explode. I didn't send a long message. I didn't beg for answers. Instead, I went silent. My anger turned into focus. If they wanted me invisible, I would take that invisibility and turn it into strength. The first place I poured my energy into was work. I stayed late, took on projects no one else wanted, and made sure my results spoke louder than anything I could say. Months passed, and soon my manager called me into her office with a smile. She offered me a promotion. For the first time in my life, someone was rewarding me for effort instead of ignoring it. With the new position came better pay, and with that freedom, I made another change. I signed the lease on a place of my own. The apartment wasn't just bigger. It felt like mine in a way nothing ever had. I decorated it the way I wanted, filled the kitchen with food I actually enjoyed, and for once, when I walked through the door at the end of the day, I didn't feel like I had to shrink myself down to fit in. Every corner whispered back to me, "You belong here." I also made a choice about contact. The constant phone calls, the group messages, the visits, I let them fade. I didn't respond quickly, sometimes not at all. No explanations, no excuses, just distance. At first, no one seemed to notice. But as weeks slipped into months, the tone began to shift. My mother started leaving voicemails in a tighter, almost irritated voice. "You never come around anymore." My father would add a short line or two, never addressing the real issue, but clearly uneasy. And Emily sent shorter, sharper texts, demanding things instead of asking. She had always leaned on me more than she realized. When she needed help with resumes, I was the one editing them. When she struggled with bills, I was the one quietly spotting her money. When she needed someone to listen, I was the one who picked up the phone. But now I wasn't there, and she didn't know what to do without me. I could sense her frustration growing in every clipped message she sent. The absence started to work on them the way I hoped it would. Without me constantly propping them up, cracks began to show. And while they stewed in confusion, I built a life they couldn't touch. I woke up each morning in a home I paid for myself, went to a job where people respected me, and fell asleep knowing I was finally free from their control. It wasn't revenge yet, not exactly. It was preparation. A slow, steady climb toward a place where I no longer needed them, where their approval couldn't sway me. They had pushed me out, and I had decided to stay out, but this time, on my own terms. The first call came on a Sunday afternoon. I almost didn't answer when I saw her name light up my screen, but curiosity got the better of me. The second I said hello, my mother's voice carried that mix of guilt and command she often used when she wanted something. "Why don't you ever visit anymore? Family is everything," she said, dragging out the word family like it held more weight than it ever had before. I let the silence stretch before I answered. My chest felt tight, but not with sadness this time, more like resolve. Finally, I said flatly, "Family? You made it clear I was never part of it." My words hung heavy between us. On the other end, she inhaled sharply, as though she hadn't expected me to say it out loud. Instead of apologizing, she shifted gears. "Oh, don't be dramatic. Emily needs her sister right now. She's been going through a rough patch, and she misses you." The way she said it, as if my only value was tied to Emily's comfort, nearly made me laugh. It was the same story all over again. Emily first, me as an accessory. This time, though, I didn't bend. My tone stayed cold. "If she needs me so badly, maybe you should remind her how much she enjoyed laughing while you shut me out." There was a long pause. I could almost hear her mind racing, searching for the right words to smooth things over. But I wasn't interested in being soothed anymore. She tried again, softer this time. You're overthinking. You know we've always wanted what's best for both of you. I shook my head, even though she couldn't see me. What's best for me was never part of your plan, I replied. And with that, I ended the call before she could continue. When the line went dead, I didn't feel the usual ache. Instead, I felt a strange satisfaction curling through me. For the first time, the power wasn't in her hands. She had reached out because she wanted something, and I had denied her. That shift, small as it seemed, was everything. Over the next few weeks, she tried again, leaving little messages, some pleading, some annoying. Each time, I kept my distance, answering only when I wanted to, never giving her the comfort of control. I could sense the unease growing in her words, the cracks forming in her certainty that I would always be there, waiting. I hadn't raised my voice, I hadn't lashed out, but the cold edge in my responses told her more than any shouting match ever could. She was finally beginning to understand. I wasn't the quiet, compliant daughter she could sideline anymore. And the knowledge that she needed me more than I needed her was a victory I savored in silence. It started with whispers, little things I caught in passing when my mother tried to slip details into conversations. Emily had been late to work too many times, forgotten deadline, mouthed off to her boss. At first, I didn't pay it much attention. But then the inevitable happened. She was let go. My mother's voice cracked when she admitted it over the phone, like losing that job was the end of the world. For Emily, maybe it was. She'd always believed doors would open for her simply because she walked up to them smiling. Not long after that, I heard about her relationship crumbling. The man she had paraded around at holidays finally walked away. According to what little Dad shared, he was exhausted by her demands, her constant need to be adored. He packed his things and didn't look back. For the first time in her charmed life, Emily was left standing alone. She turned to the only people she thought she could count on, our parents. But their finances weren't what they used to be. Dad had been cutting hours at work, and Mom's endless spending habits had finally caught up with. When Emily came crying for help, they couldn't provide the safety net she expected. I imagined her in their kitchen, pleading, only to see disappointment on their faces. The girl who had always been protected suddenly had no one to shield her from reality. Meanwhile, I was thriving. My career was steady, my home comfortable, my savings growing with each paycheck. I carried myself with a confidence I had never known under their roof. It wasn't about showing off. It was about knowing I had built this life with no help from. The contrast was impossible to ignore. They had placed all their bets on Emily, and now she was faltering while I stood strong. I began to notice subtle changes in their tone whenever they spoke to me. There was hesitation, as if they were embarrassed by the situation. For years they had acted as if I didn't measure up, yet now I was the one with stability, the one who had her life together. Their golden child was slipping, and the daughter they once cast aside looked like the reliable one. Though they never said it outright, I could feel the shift. My absence had already unsettled them, but watching Emily stumble made it worse. They had built their world around her shine, and now that shine was dimming. For once, I wasn't the one scrambling to prove myself. They were the ones scrambling to cover the cracks she left behind. The irony wasn't lost on me. The very daughter they had dismissed, overlooked, and even uninvited now stood in the place of strength they thought Emily would always hold. And I knew deep down this was only the beginning of them realizing how wrong they had been. The invitation came on a Tuesday evening. My mother's voice was softer than usual, almost pleading as she explained they were planning a dinner. Just us, to make things right. She insisted it would mean a lot if I showed up, especially since Emily had been struggling. I could hear the desperation tucked into her words. For years, they had excluded me without a second thought. Now, suddenly, I was the one they wanted at the table. I agreed without hesitation, but not for the reason she hoped. I knew this was my chance to walk into their world on my terms, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the woman they could no longer dismiss. On the night of the dinner, I dressed with care, nothing flashy but polished, elegant, a quiet statement that my life was intact and thriving. When I entered their house, the shift was immediate. My presence filled the space differently than it ever had before. Emily sat at the table, her arms crossed, her eyes flicking over me with thinly veiled resentment. She had once been so sure of her place above me, but now her insecurity was written all over her face. I didn't acknowledge her sulking. Instead, I walked to my father and handed him a carefully chosen gift, a book on a subject he loved. The look of surprise on his face told me he hadn't expected such a gesture, not after years of his silence. For once, he looked at me with something close to respect. My mother tried to direct the evening, forcing small talk, smiling too hard, but I responded with a calm politeness that kept her at arm's length. I wasn't rude, but I wasn't warm either. The balance had shifted, and she felt it. Every attempt she made to control the flow of conversation slipped through her hands, while I sat steady, self-assured, no longer seeking her approval. Dinner passed with strained laughter and glances exchanged across the table. The unspoken truth hovered in the room. I didn't need them. I had arrived looking secure, carrying myself with dignity, and no one could take that from me. Emily's bitterness, my mother's forced cheer, my father's quiet awe, it all told me what I needed to know. They saw it. They felt it. As I sipped my drink and listened to them stumble through pleasantries, I realized the real revenge wasn't in sharp words or raised voices. It was in this moment, sitting there while they struggled to reconcile who I had become with who they had always told me I was. They had cast me out thinking I would crumble. Instead, I returned stronger, untouchable, and completely free of their grip. The power that once belonged to them now rested with me, and the best part was that I didn't even have to flaunt it. My very existence in that room, steady and unshaken, was enough to show them everything they had lost. The night stretched on until the moment came when I couldn't hold it back any longer. My mother kept circling the conversation, acting as if nothing serious had ever happened, trying to wrap the evening in small talk. I set my fork down and looked her directly in the eye. The room fell still. My voice was steady as I said, "When you told me not to come to your birthday, you made it clear Emily was your only daughter. I built a life without you, and I'm happier now than I ever was under your roof." The color drained from her face. For once, the practiced smile slipped, replaced by raw panic. She stammered at first, then the tears came quickly, spilling down her cheeks. She reached across the table, pleading, "I didn't mean it like that. Please, don't turn your back on me. We're family. I need you." Her words tumbled out, desperate and uneven, nothing like the controlled woman who had dictated every moment of my childhood. Emily reacted differently. She shoved her chair back so hard it scraped against the floor. Her eyes burned with fury, her lips pressed into a hard line. "This is ridiculous," she snapped, then stormed out of the room without looking back. The slam of the door echoed through the house, leaving a trail of bitterness in her. She couldn't stand the shift, couldn't stand that I was no longer the one shrinking in her shadow. My father sat frozen, caught between the collapse of one daughter and the rage of the other. He didn't move, didn't speak, just lowered his gaze like he finally understood the damage his silence had caused. I rose slowly, smoothing the fabric of my dress. My mother's sobs followed me, her hands trembling as she begged for another chance. But I felt no urge to comfort her. I wasn't cruel, but I wasn't bending anymore. I had given them every opportunity in the past to see me, to love me, and they had thrown it away. As I walked toward the door, a calm washed over me. My heart didn't race, my hands didn't shake. I wasn't leaving in anger. I was leaving in strength. The true revenge wasn't in shouting or tearing them down. It was in proving, by the life I had built, that I was everything they claimed I could never be. Outside, the night air felt sharp and clean. I inhaled deeply, letting the cool breeze wrap around me. Behind me, the house sat heavy with regret and resentment. Ahead, the world felt wide open, mine to claim. Each step I took away from that house was lighter than the last. I didn't glance back. I didn't need to. The chapter had closed. My independence wasn't just survival, it was victory. And with that, I walked forward, stronger than ever, carrying nothing of their cruelty with me. Do you think I made the right choice by walking away, or should I have forgiven them? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And if you enjoy stories like mine, subscribe and hit the notification bell.